Hello, 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 everyone. My name is Maebel Lovegood, and I welcome you to my show, Step into Sovereignty. This is the very first episode, and I am so excited to talk to you all. This is the type of episode that's gonna pack a punch. Since I am new to the YouTubes, I deeply appreciate you all hitting that like and subscribe button just so that the algorithms can get this message out to as many people as possible. This is an episode that you won't want to miss. So I was born on January 28th. Not the new year of the astrological calendar, but the Gregorian calendar. It is fitting to say that within both New Years, Aquarius and Aries, we are allowing the winds of change to blow through and pour its beautiful wisdom upon the world with the power and impact of the Ram. I will be presenting this message to you at the beginning of 2025 and the entrance into Aries season. For the longest time, I was drawn to the number 28. It is a number that draws symbolism from the lunar cycle that correlates to a woman's cycle. 28 is also the number of days in connection to the emotional cycle in the biorhythm that impacts not only your emotional state, but your creativity and your sensitivity. Now, with the image of a cycle at the forefront of your mind, I want you to ponder upon what a cycle represents and means. The ending of something and the beginning of something new. Common theme of my soul's way of processing is to embody the Hermit card. It is an archetype that very much resonates with my soul, as well as the Magician card. I have embodied the Hermit archetype at least 3 times in my life. The first time lasted 3 years. The second time lasted 2 years. And the most recent time began on November 13th, 2023, and lasted till about a few months ago. So before I go into the significance of this date, I would like to tell you a little bit about myself in regards to my spiritual gifts and abilities. Since I was little, I've always been a dreamer, literally and figuratively. In the mental state sense, I always had incredible and creative ideas that I could envision and make possible through art, or by means of embodying those traits I pictured. Within the physical or metaphysical sense, I had incredibly vivid dreams during the sleeping state. I was a lucid dreamer before it became more spoken of and prevalent as it is now. It is something that I dreaded for many, many years. I was an avid sleepwalker and also dealt with sleep paralysis and astral projection. But as a little child, I would experience having picnics in a brilliant white light room with white tigers and angelic like entities. And other times I would wake up outside in the thunderstorm just on the back of my porch. And as I got older and I dealt with the side effects of sleep paralysis and astral projections, I wasn't cognitively aware of what I was experiencing. I had a deep fear of those states of consciousness, not realizing that I was experiencing the astral realm through the lenses of a child dealing with trauma. So any fears I had within would be projected internally. I could not connect to my spirit guides or my higher self as I can do now. Of course, I'm still working on that and learning that. Nor did I have an awareness at the time that I had a spirit guides or teachers and a higher self. Even though they were there, I could not see them or feel them due to the disconnect from the trials and difficulties I was experiencing during those early stages of my life. There have been many blessings that have come through my dreams. I was led to Arizona at a young age, not knowing it was where I needed to be in order to heal and step into my own sovereignty. My higher self literally led me to the desert to go through my dark night of the soul, my awakening process, as well as my initiatory phase into my higher calling. Some examples that I can give you: I was made aware of my husband and where to find him and how to prepare myself for that time, I was made aware of the souls that would one day come into my life as my children. And more dreams that relate to not only myself, but to the collective and to the world, which is the topic of today's message and discussion. I am a seer. I know it's pronounced seer, but I like to say seer. I am a scribe, a transcriber, and a herald through the mediums of the arts in writing and through verbal communication. In relation to these spiritual gifts, the layers that solidify and intensify these abilities are connected with myself being a psychic empath. At its core, more so for me, I embody more of the qualities of a Hypnogogic empath. I encourage you to look up what a Hypnogogic empath is, as well as the other spiritual abilities I've shared with you today. With these interwoven and complementary abilities, I've been guided to and chosen and accepted the calling to be a living psychopomp, pretty much. And I'm pretty much a spiritual doula of sorts for assistance throughout your own spiritual healing process and guidance with your higher self towards stepping into your own self-sovereignty. Over the course of this year, you will come to understand the unique and creative ways in which I infuse, express, and share my gifts, and ways in which I will encourage you as well and comfort you in stepping into your own unique gifts and your own abilities and your own strengths. My way of thinking is infectious, and I hope it wakes your soul into embracing all of your own quirky, beautiful uniqueness. Part of me in sharing this message with you today are the steps I needed to take in my own initiatory process. With this very recording, I am fully accepting my role as a spiritual healer and guide, and choosing to embody my sacred higher calling. And in doing so, I bravely and humbly and authentically, I bow my head in gratitude to the universe and Mother Earth for allowing me to bring myself into the sacred space of beauty, of joy, of laughter, of honesty, and of unconditional love. There is an importance for you to know what led me to what transpired on November 13th, 2023, as well as the days following this event. In 2023, I was at a point in my healing journey where I was willing to try any of the out-of-the-box methods to try and get to the root of what was going on within my mental and emotional field. I was experiencing chronic depression and severe anxiety that stemmed from complex trauma. And it truly felt like there was not an end in sight to when these feelings would ever subside. Even after doing the internal framework of therapy and therapeutic medicine within the Western structure, and on a side note, when I was younger, I was a lot more holistic and drawn to the Eastern medicine modalities, but I fell out of habit of that way of living after I met my husband. No fault to him, I promise, but it is something that I am integrating and transitioning into, and I have been. I've gone through many years since I was little of internal healing through therapists ranging in EMDR, CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and as well as DBT counseling, and gaining external tools throughout everyday life to try and process my emotions. Even through all of these modalities of psychological healing, I was still struggling on an emotional and mental level, and it was eating me inside. I was angry and tired, and I did not understand why I didn't feel whole, why I wasn't healed, why I couldn't move on, or why I couldn't let go of the things that were invisible to the naked eye. I reached a crossroad within myself, a space where I confronted the giant ass wall that was towering over me. I had to try and get to the bottom of what was suppressed or repressed within my subconscious, or to see if there was any possible brain damage that I sustained from trauma. I know that sounds extreme, but trauma on all levels can do that. And if you did not know, it can physically damage the neural pathways within your brain and the network surrounding it, and it's not able to connect new ones within that area. And remember, your neural pathway is very complex, so they're very tiny. It's not like there's this huge gap. If there was any damage that I had sustained, then I wanted to be able to find a way to heal and create new neural pathways. And I wanted to regenerate and fix what felt like a blockage or a glitch within the way that I was feeling and perceiving my reality. One of the main reasons for why I was choosing to do everything within my power to heal and move on was for my 2 little ones. Within the early stages of my awakening process, I didn't understand why it was so important for me to heal generational trauma. I know that sounds like a no-brainer, but I truly felt ashamed in a sense for feeling so passionately about making this happen for myself and for my lineage. It doesn't help that within my early stages of healing, I didn't have the support within my family growing up. There was a very basic understanding of the concept, but their own wounds prevented them from fully grasping why healing generational trauma was so very important to me. Even within the realms of today's society, we can all agree that healing from generational trauma is beneficial. You are making the active and beautiful choice to stop behavioral patterns that have been passed down from familial generations, and not allowing it to shape or affect your future offspring or future life path decisions, even if you chose not to have kids. Healing generational trauma and wounds felt like a life and death situation for me. Deep within, I knew I had to fill this part of responsibility as both a creator and a parent. For me, I knew healing this aspect of me was key, and not only being fully present and nurturing my children towards their highest potential without carrying the weight of their parents' experiences. I knew and I wanted to change mine and my offspring's future life trajectory and chosen destiny. I didn't know how, but my children were my goal in achieving what felt like an impossible challenge. I wanted to make my children and the things that I created my world and my universe. Within my own ideology and beliefs, as well as guidance from my higher self and guides, anything that you as a woman or man creates is considered a child. You are birthing your creations into existence with the physical realm through channeled consciousness and source. Everything that you manifest should be treated with great care. Your creations in any form within this life is a need for you to steward and be held with higher understanding. It is a responsibility of yours to nurture every one of the things that you create, and in helping it reach its full potential. It is your job to guide it in love towards the opportunities that they choose to engage within the physical and spiritual realms of this world. There was nothing per se wrong with the trauma therapists that I worked with throughout my life. But I know that there were parts of myself that I would not allow me to confront my deepest shadows in front of another person. They would not understand, which is something that I thought and fully believed in to my core. And in ways I'm still working with. Even though I was actively working on and being consistent on trying to heal the past and the present, I was aware that if there was aspects of myself that weren't willing to open up to strangers, I would need to find other out-of-the-box ways and methods to help me dig deep. And coax out those buried emotions that were attached to the memories that refused to escape my thinking process. It was as if the answers was right in front of my face, but I just couldn't see it. Either from fear of seeing it or just innocent in ignorance. The months up to November 13th, 2023, and what was transpired within the days following the said events, I decided to go through a program with my psychiatry office that was offering ketamine therapy treatments. Now, before I proceed, I want you all to know that I am not selling ketamine as a form of healing. I am simply relaying to you the process in my own healing journey that opened up the doors to a small part of my spiritual awakening. After this experience, I was very much aware and guided by my spirit guides and higher self in finding holistic methods such as meditation, sound therapy, hemisync, and yoga nidra to sustain a healthy, consistent way of healing internally and for stepping into my psychic gifts. This is something that my body personally needed per what my spirit guides had told me. Ketamine was just my own personal catalyst in the event that my spirit guides led me to. And in which they were able to troubleshoot me into awakening and flipping on my pineal gland in full force. Essentially, they took me out of sleeper mode. And I know that there are other ways and experiences that people have experienced within having their own light bulb moment and activations. There are many holistic forms of psychotropic drugs and Eastern modalities as well as breath work that can stimulate the pineal gland and neural systems into waking spiritually. So to continue and to begin with the event of November 13th, I went in ready with a journal in hand to document what transpired visually. Now I'm going to be taking you briefly through my very first session and what I experienced within the hypnagogic state during that session. Everything is black, and like a slow dimmer, I observed stars begin to come alive within the frame I was observing. A galaxy with each star a different shade of light and color. The colors of the stars morphed and transitioned to a backdrop of solid colors, with shapes vectoring in and out. Each color and the shapes within were connected to a state of an emotional feeling. My body seemed to let me grasp what I was feeling before a pulling sensation began to draw the color and formations into a black hole. Let go. The words echoed within me. I noticed the feeling of being uncomfortable. I was resisting the gravitational pull of that hole that was sucking in those emotions. But what stood out to me within that brief struggle was the awareness that I had the choice to be okay with how I was feeling. And with that fleeting thought, I observed myself being okay with letting go of that emotion and allowing myself to feel that pull inward and swallowing of that emotion. Everything changed back to a black galaxy-like setting with my eyes on a single point star, and before I was aware of it, I began transitioning to another feeling and impression. A different color encompassed my view, and shapes were weaving in and out of my peripheral. I was feeling those shapes as if they were the signature or blueprint of that said emotion, even though I couldn't put to words the emotions I was visualizing within that moment. Once again, the swirling of the black hole emerged, and I felt the uncomfortable feeling again. Let go, the words echoed. There was a gentle, yet firmness to the way it commanded. This time, I still felt the resistance, but I allowed myself to sit with that feeling of the uncomfortableness and watch the grip of my control loosen as the emotion was sucked in to the blackness. This time, there was a hint of playfulness with my observation, and a hint of peace poked its way within the field that transitioned back to the galaxy in front of me. I went through this process over and over again, experiencing colors ranging from Band-Aid pink, lime and mossy green, and teal. The shapes transitioned between what best that I could describe as going from 1D to 2D to 3D to 4D shapes, and there were textures seamlessly layered upon each form. Each and every time I cycled through the experiences, the swirling black hole appeared slowly and pulled in the colors and emotions and told me to let go. Each time became easier and easier for me to familiarize myself with that uncomfortable pull, and I finally stepped into it and I began to enjoy the process. I couldn't stop thinking about that presence that soothed me into submission. The words let go, holding its own with the chaos that dissolved into the night sky. I kept on having images or feelings that reminded me of a frog. And my conscious self kept verbally saying out loud, frog. And an image of me as a frog within a womb morphed within my view, and the feeling of I'm a frog overcame me. A smile and laughter erupted from within because I remembered how much my husband loved frogs as a child. And I said out loud, I'm his frog. And I kept thinking that my soul was a frog and that maybe the real reason my husband loved me was because I was a spiritual frog. I could sense the transition back to reality was coming, and I was worried I would crash after feeling peaceful and aware of being so within that bliss state. It was a very smooth transition. Of course, I was aware that the effects would continue throughout the day and weeks, so the edge I was worried about wasn't gonna necessarily happen. The first dream that I had that night was short. In this dream, I had 2 llamas. I was a child and I was aware that one llama was bigger than the other one. They stood in a cage inside one side of my bedroom. And in the morning, I let them out of their cage. Without hesitancy, they ran as fast as they could out of my bedroom, jumping over my backyard wall and into the neighbor's backyard, who happened to have a bunch of aggressive dogs. I had the thought, the llamas hate me. And a sadness welled within me. They hated me and they couldn't stand me that much that they would rather stay in a yard with ravenous dogs that could potentially hurt them. Then I thought, but at least they would be outside free rather than caged within my bedroom. I'm putting it there for observations. This small dream is what led into the main focus of this show's episode. My guides worked with me heavily through the dreamscape in order to communicate with me and show me through symbolism and synchronicities what was taking place within my awakened space and reality, and what areas I needed to be aware of in order to heal within my deep subconscious. So, quick side note, after my 1.5-year journey through learning the different types of dreams I experienced, I was able to understand through my guides which one were meant for my own personal growth and those which messages were meant to be shared. This dream was basically a holographic and telepathic communication between my higher self and my guides and Mother Earth. When I experience telepathy within my dreams, everything is explained through instant feeling, impressions, and purposeful guidance through the visuals. For me, my dreams are like movies that I'm in. I can see things from every vantage point and camera angles, whether above or below. I feel the people's experiences and their emotions around me, which helps paint an overall picture. Essentially, my guides were showing me what our reality in the present and future looks like on an energetic dimensional level. But I was interacting with it in a virtual-like reality set. It was the astral realm layered on top and within the reality that we exist in now. You can view it like I will be guiding you through a Renaissance painting with different sections telling a story. But I will be verbally guiding you through this experience. As you will become aware, and what I discovered towards the end of this vision and dream was that my guides were giving me a map. A big map. And you will notice that I'm telling the dream and vision from how I was interacting and experiencing within it. It was like they placed a little version of me into a sim space and guided me through the realm of its symbolic space. I was literally a Sims. This vision and dream, as well as another dream that I had days later, one that I'll be sharing with you at another time or another day, will be broken down into many episodes. I'll be doing deep dives and breakdowns of each section within the dream once per week. And my channel will not have any memberships. I'm a big supporter of all-inclusiveness. I completely understand why other awesome channels choose to do memberships, but I authentically wish to stay open with you. What you see is what you get with me, and I give you my all. For the only way to interpret this complex and vast dream is to go in depth and guide you within the space of each area and what was transpiring. I had to do a lot of investigative work and learning along this journey. Today, I'm simply giving you the full story in its whole verbally. But I will have original sketches that I'll be using to show you and guide you through the areas. And I'll be doing quick sketches as well to show you the grid of the complete map. So I will let you all sit with the message that will be given today for a bit. I mean, a week is enough, but if you, I could give you guys 2 weeks. I'll have you marinate on it, and I will come back to you with a breakdown of the first area. I'm kind of going to be giving you a breakdown like a syllabus in a way. For the weekly episodes, I will be drawing you in-depth illustrations that kind of correlate with that area and what I saw within that space. I didn't get time to do them all for this episode, but I did that because I wanted to do more pictures for each of the sections. Since I'm an artist, I wanted to give you a multi-layer experience through illustrations of my own. This isn't a vision for you to be afraid of, which I mean, I can't really say not to be afraid because I feel like it's a tower moment. It was a tower moment for me when I experienced the dream. So please take a moment to pause the show if you need to take 3 deep breaths. Center yourself and actively choose to detach yourself and try to view what I'm saying from an expanded symbolic perspective. Anytime throughout my reading, if you feel fear rising up, take a pause, a breath, detach, and move forward. If you know at all while listening that you are observing is triggering for you, feel free to turn it off or proceed however you see fit for yourself. Take it in increments if you need to. I will make sure to have everything timestamped so you can go through my lengthy speech and re-listen to any parts that stuck out to you or made an impression. I will have the chats turned off for this message and episode because I will not support any potential fear-mongering or contentious dialogue that could hurt or spread panic amongst any of you who will be listening. So if you want, you can send me emails. I'd love to hear from you and talk with you in that way. But I ask that you observe, retain, and discern for yourself. But enough of my constant buildup. I do appreciate your patience and for me giving you all those explanations. But now that you have the full backstory and overall structure of what I'm going to tell you, I now step into the Herald and present to you the dream and the message. We were together as a family. Me, my husband, my daughter, and my son. My son was a baby still, and my daughter was a toddler with a diaper still. I began the dream with my family walking into a warehouse building, like an IKEA warehouse, and I got the vibes from the area that it was a fun zone for parents and their children. Family Fun Zone was written across a sign above the building. We entered the structure on the upper Midwest corner, and the maze-like concept of the building funneled down to the bottom southeast corner and side. Within the building, we were present amongst other parents and families with their kids. We were having fun and laughing. Everyone was relaxed, enjoying themselves and comfortable enough to allow their children to roam and explore and have fun. From a ceiling vantage point, I observed everyone walking through the maze-like structure. It felt at times like a building that held children's science museums. Usually each state has an area within a city that has a building like this. It's supposed to be engaging to families and kids with the interactive activities that are geared towards learning about science and history and innovation. But I was observing the children and parents interacting with the given science models, ones that kids could press buttons on or play on. And as I followed my family through the structure, I remember smelling poop and getting the thought to check my toddler girl's diaper. The instant I got that thought, she started to run ahead with a group of little ones, laughing and enjoying herself. She started to run farther away from both of us adults, and I watched as her line of sight was out of my view. She was going to get lost in the crowd at this point, and I also was worried about her dirty diaper. I was holding my baby boy and trying to juggle the backpack that I had carried on my shoulder. So I asked my husband if he could go get our daughter and bring her back. He moved ahead, calling out for her while I walked hastily behind him, following his lead. And as I was trying to maneuver myself through the crowd, it felt like there was more people around me, or maybe the space within the space was narrowing, funneling us closer and closer together. Now, within this section of the building, the funneling walls led us all into a space that turned into a hallway. Lined up beside my husband, 2 lines were created down the hallway. I observed as me and my husband stepped into this cage-like elevator space. The floor below us was made up of 2 side-by-side square white tiles on our feet, and there were people below us holding them in place by their extended arms, with their children below their feet. Each of us were squished onto their given square tile. And the way we moved downward was by the bottom floor shuffling their way out from under the tiles they were holding, thus allowing the next level of humans to proceed downwards. I have zero clue how we were able to balance ourselves from above and below the given space without collapsing, but everyone seemed to be making their way through the given system with somewhat ease, even if it seemed like a struggle. From the cage walls within the elevator shaft, I observed a stage to the side of us, and in front of the stage was an audience. The cage wall that surrounded the space of the elevator extended out across the bottom landing's floor, separating the audience from the stage. I watched as some men guided our children to walk up on the stage and perform while they shuffled all the adults along the bottom of the stage. The audience across from us were applauding and laughing amongst themselves. Some people at this point were separated from their kids and unable to return to them after the children's performance. We were fortunate to reunite with my daughter, for I was still holding my son. Every parent and child's reuniting took place near a door that led to a stairwell. There was an exit sign. And while walking up the steps, each family was assigned a floor along the vertical stairwell going upwards. At this point, I was being shown a vantage point from outside the given area. I observed that we had made our way to the bottom southwest side of the building, and the stairwell was connected to an outdoor metal canopy that was at least 10 human-sized levels. So what I mean by that, and you'll see in the pictures, is it wasn't like a full floor that had like 10-foot ceilings. The levels were like the size of a person that could like stand up. So it created 10 human-sized levels. And this vast canopy was like ones you would see within a warehouse where shipments are picked up and taken by forklifts and boom lifts. The outdoor canopied area was covered in dirt floors that opened up to the outside. So starting from the bottom and proceeding upward, each family was assigned a section along their given floor. At least 10 rows by width, and they were made to get down on their hands and knees and shuffle along a straight line with one hand once again holding a square tile above their head, while the other hand pulled like their body forward along the given linear path that is placed before them. Also take note of was that their hands were supporting the weight of the person above them. And for those who were, for the person below, their knees and legs were supporting and balancing the weight and wobbliness of those that were supporting them. Everything was just supporting and balancing one another and creating a multi-layer grid-like structure. And when observed from afar, we all formed a big box or cube. So like a 10 by 10 like grid. For if one person was to fall out of line or crumble from the weight of what they were bearing and trying to protect within their square, everyone would collapse. The process repeated to each level until it reached the top. So everyone was doing the same thing on each line that they were in. Once again, I quickly became aware of the reliance that everyone within the structure had upon one another. One false move and the weight of your movements could affect and kill everyone from the crushing weight of the collapse. The first time I moved through the tunnels, I kept my son under me while my husband kept our daughter below himself. He was ahead of me along the same path, and I observed as my mother-in-law was following along the same path from behind. And just a side note, my mother-in-law is incredible and an amazing woman. And at this point within the dream, I'll make you aware of the fact that I experienced death within the dreams. A lot. Each time an outcome happened from one false move, I was taken back visually to the section I left off in and basically guided to do it again and find a way out, in a sense. My mind went back and repeated many potential scenarios within the warehouse space, reliving it over and over again until I could make it out of this linear tunnel and out of the warehouse walls and make it safely out with my family. Now, when the human-made cube crumbled the first time, a group of workermen within the outside space of the warehouse began using the construction boom lifts and claws to scoop up the bodies of families. They would drive them over to a pile that was meant to be processed in a gigantic industrial incinerator. They were laughing and jolly with no care, as if it was just another day's work. And I was made aware that they were working for someone, but not made aware who that someone was. Now, the second time I tried going through the human cube and it collapsed, some people survived and tried to escape or run away, but they were shot down by the warehouse workers and put in the piles again. Now, the third time, people were given chances to go on the ground instead of the stairwell and line up along rows of boxes containing files. There were just rows. And everyone was to sort through everyone's family history or lineage and records and find their names and sort theirs out alphabetically. Like they're supposed to find theirs physically amongst just millions of paper. Like I just remember just tons of paper. And they were to sort theirs out alphabetically. But everyone had their own method of filing the given records. Plus, out of chaos, everyone ended up just canceling out each other's progress. Everyone was given a certain time frame within 30 minutes, basically. And when time ran out and people couldn't find their own records through the chaotic mass exchange and from running down the aisles, the warehouse men would laugh and say, "Time's up," and would gun down the people. I got the sense in that moment that it felt like everyone was set up for failure from the start. It was very clear that no one was working together. It was mass hysteria, and there was a sense of belief that everyone was fending for themselves, which caused even more chaos and disorder that left people self-sabotaging each other. The fourth time I went through, we were back within the tunnels and the man-made cube. I finally was able to progress forward without it collapsing on me, and I was able to make it out of the tunnel into the outdoor space of the warehouse. And as soon as I got out, all the people behind me became entrapped. So each tile space that they were holding above them and the tile space that was sustaining them from below was closed off from the tunnel in front of them and from behind them, making the space within them a complete body-sized cube. They were boxed in from their immediate space as well from the overall structure of the man-made cube. So we became boxes stacked upon each other from all sides. And once they became entrapped within their own cube, the workers had these machines that could compact them and encase them in additional packages that looked like VHS tapes and CD cases. I remember seeing the VHS tapes of Dumb and Dumber and Back to the Future. Don't ask me why, but I remember them because I remember pulling them out. But the forklifts or boom lifts picked up the individual human encased cubes and placed them once again amongst the piles that were to be put in the incinerator. And then I heard and I felt it. It was a feeling, and I heard it. This is a spiritual holocaust. An enslavement of the soul. Those were the words that were said inside my consciousness. Again, before the workers could carry them away, I went back to the enclosed boxes. I found my son with my mother-in-law, as well as one of my brothers. I removed the bricked walls of the VHS tapes surrounding them, and I pulled them out of the boxes, and I towed them away outside of the warehouse walls. I was aware at this point that my husband and my daughter had already made it out, but I couldn't find them. And then the fifth and last time with the outdoor warehouse, I made it out and escaped without any problems. And I proceeded down an open dirt road that transitioned and turned into this vast empty desert with cactuses and weeds. I remember when I looked back, and I thought about what I had experienced. And I remember thinking we were set up for failure. It was a rigged system. Like a frog in warm water, then boiled alive. Those were like literally the exact words that I used within me. At this point, my family was not with me. And I was aware within my subconscious that it was my job solely within the dream to experience this process. I mean, I needed to find the way out for my family. And I think my guides would have placed the visuals of my family there still. It would have just made my dream even longer. Like, I think I would have been worried about them the whole entire time. So I think, especially for this area, I think the focus was included with my family. I think it was specifically for that area. So that was the first area. And so now I'm going to transition you to the second area, which was in the desert. So the desert landscape went on for a while before turning into these natural structures of the sandstone canyons within Antelope Canyon, and the sandstone cathedral located in the American Southwest. It's on Navajo land, east of Lake, Arizona. I know that there are other structures like this within the canyons of Utah as well, but I remember when I saw these, I didn't know what they were called, and so I like typed up, what are those like wind sand things, and that it popped up as that, and I was like, that's exactly it. And so I mean, I live in Arizona, so I mean, it's fitting that like it's, Antelope Canyon. But it was literally the like it was the place. I encourage you to look it up so that you can visually put yourself there and understand what I'm saying. But from the vast width deserts, I proceeded through narrow paths of the slot canyons. That's what they're called, the slots. The sandstones towered above me and opened up to the skies above. And the paths I walked continued to wind and weave throughout the canyon, with people who were able to escape walking in lines through the slots. The paths curved steadily downwards and became more narrow as I observed the lines of people huddled closer together to descend along the sandstone walls to the entrance of this cavern-like opening. This opening was a dead end, but an entrance to a cave. The slots above, they formed an uneven circle if you looked up at the sky. I looked and I could see people curiously staring at the entrance to the cave, where there stood themselves within the inner part of the entrance to the cave. Their doppelgangers stood and smiled back at them, beckoning for them to come into the cave with them. Something else to know, I observed a translucent lining, like a veil of sorts that was like a force field or burial that kind of rippled and flowed along the lining of the entrance to the cave. It was creating like an invisible wall. And the beings within the cave did not and would not and possibly could not cross that invisible line. That's why they waved for the people on the other side to come closer. It was very creepy. Very like creepy vibes. Like it was just unsettling. It just was like, I just remember feeling quietness, just this eerily quietness within the cave, within that space. So they did not speak. They only smiled and they waved and beckoned. And I stood back and observed again against the back wall of the circular cavern space. I wanted to see how they interacted with the people in line and what would happen. Or if they went into the cave. I wanted to see what was going to happen if they went into the cave. Because if they did and they were okay, I was like, okay, I'll go in too. But those in line seemed entranced and intrigued and mesmerized by the cave copies of themselves. And as they proceeded to stick their hands out to shake their doppelgangers' hands across that threshold of that barrier's lines, they were immediately pulled in or swallowed up by their copies and dragged into the darkness of the cave. Other people didn't shake hands. All they needed to do was stand in front of the barrier line, and hands would poke through and drag them into the darkness. Wailing could be heard, and the face of the doppelgangers became distorted when they would grab them. It became very menacing and wild when they pulled them in. Their behavior was like a light switch, smiling, friendly, kind, and dangerous, unearthly, and cryptid-like. I backed away. I was out of there. I was confused at this point because people didn't seem to be aware or acknowledge that what was going on in front of them. The procession of people continued to descend into the darkness of the cave. They dreamily moved forward with no care. I needed to leave, and so I headed back up the tunnel, and running up the narrow pathway past the people in line. And I noticed individuals from my high school days in line waiting to descend to the entrance to the cave. Not everybody, just some people that I recognized. And I yelled for them to not go and to head back through the sandstone slot. But they either looked at me like they couldn't hear me, or they're indifferent to what I was saying. They just did not see the threat in front of them. Some even seemed annoyed with me and just simply ignored me. But I proceeded out of the canyon and towards the wide open desert where I began. I was met with thought again. You need to find a way out. Before I tried to find another path or route out, I was curious and I wanted to know where the cave led. If I couldn't find a way through the canyon, what if I went atop the sandstones and found the other side of that cave? Or what lay beyond that point? Facing the entrance to the canyon, I became aware of a sloped pathway that led to the top of the canyon, and it plateaued at the top. So I slowly ascended up this like curved road that flanked to the left side of the canyon. So if I was like facing it. Once again, at the top of the plateau, I made my way along the open cracks and towards the location of the cave. And I was able to follow it until I reached that circular opening at the top. And I saw the procession of people waiting at the entrance to the cave. And as I walked closer to the edge of that opening, I noticed along the plateau that there was a ledge that wasn't connected to the cave. I walked over and I placed my hand atop this like man-made sandstone balcony. And I was standing at the ledge of this cliff. The cliff was like this clean sandstone wall that extended for miles, like on both ends or both sides of me. And when I looked down to see if there was an exit to the cave from the bottom of the cliff's wall, like there was nothing. So there was no way out. Either the cave descended into the depths of the earth or it just simply ended with darkness. It was just this wall and then wasteland in front of me that went on for miles with no end in sight. And I couldn't get out this way. So I turned around and I headed down. And once again, I was met with the words, I need to find a way out. And as I walked down the curved path that led from the top of the plateau, I saw a new path that curved to the southeast. Now the terrain transitioned here to a grass plains with pockets of small lakes and wildflowers everywhere. And these small lakes were surrounded by these beautiful mountains that were like right up against the water. And yeah, those wildflowers, they grew everywhere, and the water was, I remember being still, and it reflected the blue sky, and it was just like, it was quiet. And it was so beautiful there, but any feelings of peace, they dissipated as these large gargoyle-like beasts flew down and perched themselves on the edge of the mountainsides. And I was aware that they were guarding, like I felt it, like I knew what they were doing, but they were guarding and they were patrolling and monitoring and protecting these given areas. One of them saw me and let out a roar, and it lunged at me and attacked. And at that moment, everything went black. Again, Maebel, I heard, go back and see if you can find a way out. So I was back at the entrance to the warehouse this time, and I headed towards the desert, and I went southeast towards the Wildflower Valley and along the mountainside. And this time I stealthily avoided the winged beasts. And I heard the words again, try and make your way mid-east, a voice said. So in between the lake's water were these strips of land that sloped upward, and they formed like these rocky terrains. One of the rock forms had a slight indentation that could hold a person under and provide shelter from like any storm that may have arisen. And once I observed the structure, one of the creatures saw me and roared towards me, and I beelined it towards and within the crevice of the boulder, and I hid behind its cavern-like walls. It went in like a little bit, but it was like enough to just create shade, not like darkness. Some time went by when I was still within that little cavern space, and I was just met with silence. So I quietly popped my head out to see if they had left. But from above me, I heard flapping of wings that had fluttered, and I looked up, and the beast had popped its head down towards me, and everything just went black. So then I heard again find a way out. Do it again. So I woke up and I'm back amongst the wildflowers in the valley this time. And I quickly followed the same path and pattern I did the previous attempts. And I was aware of the creatures' movements and the paths they took to keep watch. So I knew, where they moved. So I decided this time to walk along the shoreline of the mountainside, heading towards the central northwest where I was told to go. So I made my way around the curved path of the mountainside that connected to the water, and it sloped upwards on to land, and which led to a new grass path. This time it was grass, and I remember it being sunset, and everything turned a really beautiful violet purple, and then it was like a darker like a midnight blue almost as I was making my way up the grass slope towards the northwest. And I remember seeing lights ahead of me. And as I walked closer, I was stunned to see this tall and vast hotel with this U-shaped roundabout road that sat in front of the entrance to the hotel, like ones you see for cars to pull up alongside the buildings. And the hotel was just as wide as it was tall, and it had at least 3 glass entryways. And I remember I headed towards the middle entrance, and I got the vantage point and sensed that this main hotel was connected in the back to another conjoining hotel, and then the buildings connected to other structures within it. It was like this web, and it felt like resorts or casinos that were connected to one another. But once at the entrance to the hotel, I was met by a nervous bellhop boy. I remember him coming out through the glass doors because he saw me and it was nighttime, and he conveyed to me without his mouth moving that he could not let me in. And I asked him why, and he was kind of shifting his eyes all nervously back and forth, and he relayed to me that this was the area of the demons. He continued talking to me and said that this was the area of the demons, that they were powerful beings who, through money and power, were able to buy people of this world. And briefly, I had gangster vibes for some reason. I had pop through my head. I had other pictures pop into my head, but once again, this is something we can talk about later. But he continued to say some humans chose to work with the demons out of a desire to become like them. And some chose to work with them to gain money and power, and some chose to work with them out of fear. He was one of those who was forced into working for them, and he wanted to protect me from stepping into this place. So he basically said that there was no way that they wouldn't notice my presence, is essentially what I was told. Without questioning, I remember I bowed to him in respect, and I made my way towards the roundabout road in front of the hotel. So from a distance, I heard laughter floating across the night air, and I looked past the roundabout, and I saw this big pond in front a portion of the hotel area. And within the center of the pond was this circular raised dock that had stairs and balconies that flanked each side of the foundation. So it was a cylinder, then stairs, and then these 2 cylindered balconies that people could chill and have fun and essentially dance the night away on, while the pond below performed this water show. And it was explained to me at the time that the pond was a water intelligence, a butler entity that watches and reacts to the needs of the party goers above. It puts on water and light shows with the pond surrounding it. I know that in Las Vegas they have these, but just symbolically and metaphorically, just remember what I said about that, is that it was explained to me that the pond was a water intelligence Think about the symbolism of water. A butler entity that watches and reacts to the needs of the partygoers above. It puts on a water and light show with the pond surrounding it. So at this point, I observed that this pond was in a cul-de-sac like area that was pressed up against this like a sandstone plateau. This wall was in the same area as the warehouse, but it was separated by this tall sandstone canyon-like wall. So glancing west even further towards the wall, I observed this tall cylinder bronze tower. And I couldn't see a way out, so I decided to make my way through the water of the pond so I wouldn't be detected by the partygoers. And I thought, I could just climb up that bronze pillar like structure and see what's beyond the wall. So as I approached the foundation, it looked like it had like these notches of these opening mouths that were gaped open, which then were like these balconies, and there were like these bronze mouth balconies protruding from the towers in notches, and the mouths, they resembled to me the structures on the House Moving Castle. Like, you know how House Moving Castle in House Moving Castle, the movie, in it, the actual house has like a mouth, but then there's like these little faces on it. It was essentially like that. And above the mouth, there were like these hollowed eyes that stared listless just out into space. But looking at the tower, I knew that if I climbed to the top of it, I would be able to jump from the tower to the plateau towards the warehouse floor below. Like I was parkouring it, essentially. Without a second thought, I climbed the bronze tower. And along each level and those rivets, I was able to peer into the balcony mouths. And I observed people in these trance-like states. They were surrounded by like heavy drugs or alcohol or like an ecstasy, like and they were completely consumed and lost within their minds as to what was going on around them. It felt like I was in an energy not only of dissociation, but like a bliss that left the person sick within them. They were unable to leave the rooms that they were stationed in amongst the towers. And I used the mouth of the balconies to hoist my way slowly up to the tower. And at the top of was a giant mouth, like a big one. And so I used the lips to hurtle my body onto the plateau beside it. And once I was at the top, I was able to get a better look of the warehouse area. But going back, I forgot to say that, so the cave area, so the desert area connected with the cave area was the second place. The third place was the third location that we're going to go into details in the future is the valley wildflower area with the creatures. Then the fourth area that we're going to go separate into detail is the area that includes the hotel, the pond, the AI Butler pond, and this bronze statue. So I said, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we are moving into the fifth area. So I was atop that sandstone plateau. I looked over towards the warehouse, and I just paused in shock and dismay, because from this vantage point, this viewpoint, the warehouse looked like it was part of this giant industrial park. So I saw some additional structures connected to the family funhouse building and warehouse, as well as the incinerator nearby. And I needed to know what those buildings were in the industrial park and if there was a way for me to get out from that area. So, but I couldn't believe at this point that I was making my way towards the warehouse again. Like I just looped right back again. But at this point, it was my only option to find a way out. But I walked towards the warehouse. So I made my way down somehow from that canyon plateau, or that wall plateau. And I walked toward the warehouse, and I remembered the visual of the workers on the forklifts carrying the bodies towards the incinerator. And I walked along the dirt path. So I headed that way. I headed that way towards the area that they were bringing the bodies to the incinerator. And I walked along the dirt path, and I saw another outdoor metal canopy that was attached to the backside of the man-made cube warehouse canopy area. And within the structure were white mats, like a whole bunch of white mats that were laid out across the dirt floor. And there were people that were in bowing poses or yoga poses, who were situated upon their own personal mat, with their eyes fixated upon a person at the forefront of the group of people sitting there. So the person who was sitting at the front had their arms outstretched while they sat in cross-legged poses, and he was speaking to them. So before I go any further, and before anyone freaks out and assumes that I'm saying this is me describing people who practice yoga or Eastern beliefs, or part of the New Age group, basically, I assure you that this wasn't the case. I was made aware, and it was explained to me by my guides that I was observing New Age cults. So I will emphasize the word cults. So basically, any person who takes the wisdom of the Hermetic or esoteric or Gnosis knowledges and chooses to be a leader or a professional in guiding people and teaching them the ways of their study. It felt like there was like a slight snake oil salesman vibes, but it was also mixed at times. Some communities that genuinely believed in what they were doing, and that it was genuinely centered in light. Essentially, these people, they're creating these leaders within this New Age cults. They were creating a business or entity of sorts that supports people who are seeking the esoteric wisdoms into joining their community with the intention of being their leader, much like an organized religions or business. And it felt like it was people unknowingly taking people's desires for the dissociative high of being in the state of bliss and part of the community, and using it to prop up their own egos and their own creations, and them not realizing that they were actually supporting a form of spiritual addiction that wasn't centered in true Hermetic or esoteric or Gnosis or Kabbalic beliefs. It was like there was branches that were stemming off of the core beliefs and values of mysticism, basically. So basically just spiritual addiction and a little bit of woven false light in there. Connected to the New Age cult space were people on the mats that were sending off the energy of radical belief systems connected to cults or ancient religions. What was guided for me to observe was the willingness of groups to sacrifice themselves for their belief systems within the path that they chose. They were willingly running into the industrial incinerators or sacrificing themselves next to the posing men. There were additional piles behind the mats that the warehouse workers were scooping up and placing into the fires. I felt a lot of energy of patriotism and pride, and feeling like pride was mixed in with this feeling of euphoric love. That was the best way that I could describe it. That they had a purpose. That was kind of the feelings that were impressed upon me in that moment. So from behind this building, the New Age cult building, hosted an even bigger building than the family fun house and the new age cult space. This building had big bold letters in all capital letters that said churches. Essentially what I was told was that this included every and all organized religions. To me, this did not include the religions that are like centered around ancient philosophies, of those that existed in the ancient worlds, or even ones like Hinduism or Buddhism. This is specifically in regards to any church around organized religions. Organized religions, they have many, many branch offs within their own tiers as well. And they become like their own entity. Even if there are traces of philosophy or the occult woven throughout their doctrines and principles. But this church area had like these walls that surrounded it. And next to the church building structure were two walled in pathways that led to these escalators. So I remember being curious about the escalators, and I hopped on them. Immediately I was aware that below me I was standing amongst piles and piles of metal and garbage, and there was like these trinkets and toys. And the image of the landfill in the movie, The Labyrinth, flashed through my subconscious mind. But everyone was just silently standing there as these double wide escalators began to descend downward into this subway-like tunnel. And something about it looked familiar to me. And before I could even respond, I was flipped over into the bowels of the industrial incinerator. So when I restarted from the location of the area of the church building, I realized that the double walls that led directly to the escalators connected to an entryway that the warehouse workers could pour the piles of bodies into. It was essentially like a conveyor belt. So it was like the church building, and then attached to the church building were these like two pathways, and then the pathways led onto a conveyor belt, and then the conveyor belt went down an escalator into the incinerator. If that's the best way I can describe it. But walking towards the conveyor belt, I noticed that there was a see-through like wired gate, a chain link fence that stood on the opposite side of the conveyor belt, and it looked like there was a pathway behind it. Without a second thought, I dredged my body across the junk-filled conveyor belt, and I hopped onto the sidewalk that was next to the chain link fence. And I remember I looked towards the incinerator entrance, and I noticed a maintenance worker door that was connected to the chain link fence. So I went over and I turned the knob, and lo and behold, it opened. And I walked along the path. And I remember seeing people, like one or two people, like walking ahead of me. Like it was just like only a few people were like, I felt like it was people that was kind of doing the same thing I was doing, and they're walking ahead of me. I began making my way west. And I remember looking through the chain link fence as I walked. And this area where the maintenance walk was, it felt like it was just a little bit higher, so I could look over to where the church was. And I could see the two pathways that were leading all the people, the congregational members, down like these white paths onto the conveyor belt. And I remember seeing atop of these two, the white walls of this pathway from the church, I remember there stood these church workers, such as like bishops or temple workers or clergy members, and they were all dressed in white. And they blindly and blandly ushered people in the directions of the conveyor belt. Like, I remember them just going like this or like this. And they seemed to not notice that it led to the escalators. But everyone was just faithfully walking along the white stone paths. And the ecclesiastical leaders' backs were away from the impending doom of their members and congregations just heading into the incinerator. They didn't look Like, they didn't look back. They were looking straight ahead. So at this point, I felt helpless. What was going on? I tried every possible way I could to do and find a way out, but I just couldn't. And as I walked along the pavement heading west, I came upon a train station. And there was no sign that said where it led, but I knew where it would lead. And I remember visualizing, seeing, and hearing the words, the coastline, in between land and sea. And I got on the train with no need for a ticket, and I escaped along the path of the train. And for the final time, I was given an overview perspective, like a drone perspective, of what was transpiring as I was leaving the space I explored. So I was like on the train, and I remember like seeing the train going, and then as I was like, I remember seeing, like, feeling I was the drone, and then I was like panning upwards and on top, like, of this area that I was observing. Across from the tracks of the station stood these like tall cobblestone walls of a city. And at the top were these iron guardrails and balconies that held people from above. And it was like there was houses pressed up against them, and so they were coming out onto the balconies, and then it was like the stone wall was holding it up. And I remember people were coming out, and the vantage point went even higher in the air, and I was observing that it was like this fancy village and city that sat beside the area of the industrial complex, blocked off by this wall. There's another wall that went from like the church to the family fun house down to like the desert, basically. But this wall, so it blocked off people from observing them, but they're able to observe in on the happenings of the warehouse and beyond. So they were just relishing in their fancy city and houses that were set up in this guarded city. And everyone was just holding up a glass of champagne and watching and celebrating what was happening below them. And I got the words and the feeling. It was feelings and the words that were connected to it. And it said, "This is the rich, the 1%. And I remember feeling this overwhelming sadness that just filled my conscious awareness of what was going on. And what I was being made aware of. And as the train curved and headed northwest, and I watched as the 1% just waved to those who were leaving by train. So I sat in silence and then glanced out the window on the train that just overlooked the ocean. And I observed that the side wall of the train that was facing the ocean was just covered from cart to cart with glass. So you could see everything. And the view was not confined to those tiny train windows. And it was beautiful seeing the ocean like that. And I paused for a moment, and I actually purposely did one final do-over to see if I would experience the same thing when I hopped on the train. I wanted to see if I could go farther, because the dream ended when I was just viewing the ocean. And without missing a beat, the rich came back to greet the departing with their glasses of champagne, and they looked content, and they were just waving. And I watched again the train go up the coastline, and it looked like the West Coast, but I kept getting an atmospheric energy of the East Coast. For all I know, my guides could have been expressing it to me that the train went from coast to coast, or it wasn't exclusionary. It was just a symbolic example and before I could explore any further, I was taken out of the dream space by my guides, and I was fully awake, and it was finished. So something to take note of about is the way in which I personally experience waking up from the dreamscape world. So when I'm in that fluid, lucid state, I can wake up, I can get a drink, and I can fall right back into the state I was in, essentially picking right up from where I left off. But in the process of this dream's unfolding, it felt like a nightmare at many points, and I was actively like trying to pull myself out of the experience. Like I'd wake up and I would like purposely like try to get my husband to like talk to me, like keep me up, but it was like, nope, we're taking you right back. Like I would just like, the heaviness of sleep was so strong and it would just take me right back. And I was experiencing it over and over and over again from every angle and perspective. I know I've said that a few times. And at some point within the dream, the fear I felt had subsided, and I was filled with not only just like this genuine curiosity, but like I was determined to solve this mental puzzle prison. That's what it felt like. I wanted to know what the crap was going on. And within that dream, I was aware that I was in the dream. But when I finally woke up from the dream and vision, there was an instantaneous moment of discombobulation. I genuinely forgot that I was in the present and the now, in the waking state, and I forgot that my life existed within this space, because it felt like I was in that space for such a long time, and I was so relieved, and I was crying as my memory of this current state of being was like brought to the rightful place in this reality. Like when I remembered that I was living in this that I was in my bedroom, I was like, oh, thank God. And I was crying, and I was like, how could I forget? How could I have forgotten that this was my life and my reality? Of course, this ketamine session was more of a psychotropic experience, and it really did help in opening me up multidimensionally to my psychic senses within the waking world, but the session in ways felt familiar to me. Because I had previously experienced visually and sensations similar to when I go back into lucid dreaming or deep dream states within my everyday life. What I was experiencing was my third eye fully opening. So what I'm saying is like, it's a perfect opportunity for my guides to give me this vision, and they hit me with it, is what I'm saying. So it was like this extremely potent, condensed, concentrated, this dense concentrated, like vision for me. And so I don't have these like all the time. It was just like this intense dream that was connected to the experience that I had of the ketamine session. So I want to emphasize to you all, and to be honest, that I'm still on my own spirit journey, and I'm still learning the many, many layers of myself and my psychic abilities and how the dream world works for me. But at this point, like even a few months ago, I knew once again that this dream was not just my dream. So I'm still being taught by my higher self and my teachers and guides. So just wanted to make sure to emphasize that. From the moment I had this dream, I went through a downward spiral of events. It almost felt like I was in sleeper mode, and the ketamine blasted my third eye open. I know I've said that a few times, and it sent me all the way to Kundalini mode. Like I really think I was going through a Kundalini awakening as well. And because of that, and I didn't know what it was a very this out of control feeling, because I didn't know how to control the energies that were surging through me, basically. And what I mean is this took place, these intense emotions and feelings, and this out of controlness took place for months after my experience of this dream. And this was also a tower moment for me, that's used in the tarot deck. But at this time, I was not aware. Once again, I wasn't aware of what Kundalini was, and I wasn't aware of what the third eye was. I was completely in the dark to the Hermetic or esoteric and the Kabbalic teachings and the occult. And I was at a point in my life where I was really detaching myself from old beliefs and ways of living. Ones that were connected to my past, but mainly around my familial family. And I had left a religion years prior that I was raised in as a child. I was deeply ingrained in what shaped my life. This religion, it shaped my life in the ways that I viewed the world, but mainly in my internal world. And I was raised in the perfect example of the false light. So, marrying my husband, I was given a lot of strength and safety to leave that belief system. I always describe him as my medium. He was my stabilizer. But he gave me the strength and safety to leave that belief system that didn't align with what I wanted for my own self and for the family I was creating. So having this experience was very scary for me. I was raised in a family to no fault of their own in believing that psychics did not exist. Anything that was mystical was supernatural, and it wasn't aligned with light. It was forms of mental illnesses, or the adversary was trying to keep you from experiencing the light. Jesus versus Lucifer, light versus dark. And on the other side of the double-edged sword, within the church that I was raised in, Christian church, we as kids were taught within my family, because you can add the layers of like familial beliefs added on top of like the overall teachings that you were raised with within a church. I was raised and taught to rely on leaders within a patriarchal system that sought guidance from God through the gift of the Holy Ghost. And I was taught to find out what the Spirit was telling me. I was told to, go find out what the Spirit is telling you. But I was to not believe in the Spirit from any outside source that wasn't from the church. So everything in the church was truth. And I could only turn for counsel and guidance within the system. And I could only turn to counsel to my father or to my mother. And if I sinned, I had to ask for forgiveness by going to ecclesiastical leaders for the process of forgiveness. So only the church and those in leadership knew what was best, because they were the pure enough to receive the direct revelation from God. The line of guidance from like the household went from God to man, from man to wife and children. And the man was to govern and steward his home in righteousness with the help of his wife. Now, this is not a new story. And I know that this story, and many of you have also had this story, whether it be in a religious sense or raised within a certain culture or societal dynamic. And I'm not telling this story to dredge up my wounds or my past. The past is not me. The past is in the past. I'm telling you the lesson that I did learn from the past. And the reason why I'm telling you just this tiny minuscule of my backstory is to let you know that what I was experiencing emotionally after and mentally after my awakening, I was experiencing, if you take into account the way that I was spiritually raised, okay, I was experiencing my repressed and suppressed and repressed aspects of self and all the shadow parts of me being bubbled up to the surface and projecting something about myself that I wanted to accept and believe, but couldn't because I was raised to believe that I wasn't in alignment to the story of my life. That was the truth. So the church I was raised in was the cornerstone that held everything together and was the key to returning to live with God again. But in that moment, while I went through my downward spiral and descent into darkness, and it felt like darkness over months, many months, I saw a visual like that cornerstone was being ripped from its pillar, and the stones were just crumbled to the ground, with the key just laying there broken in half. And I remember feeling and crying many times, what was I? Who was I? Where do I belong now? I mean, what is happening to me? Am I going crazy? I was raised, and pretty much, and all of us were raised to rely on the exterior world and to not trust. And I wasn't raised to trust my own internal compass and my intuition. And what this dream was telling me was the exact opposite. I was heading northwest on that train, and northwest to me, it represents both symbolically the root chakra and the crown chakra, two sides of the same coin. And I remember hearing the words, follow your own path between land and sea. Follow your roots, both from above and below. I was on a journey on that train to find myself and to step into my own sovereignty. When I had woken up from the dream, I remember feeling the words so deeply within my being. I was shown the future process of what I was to experience while on my spiritual journey. So no matter what, I was to always remember to not be dependent upon the external world, but to turn to my internal world and to myself for the answers that I was seeking for. To seek internally first and find the answers then externally. I was to flip my way of viewing the world completely upside down. I was literally experiencing the apocalypse of the soul. And I remember hearing, see through the illusions along the journey of seeking for truth. For truth will only be found and felt within you. Do not solely rely upon the truth being given to you by others. Discern for yourself. And that includes me. Discern for yourself. But in order to discern for yourself, you need to believe in the capacity within you to trust yourself. And how can you do that when you were told and taught and raised on so many different levels not to trust yourself? It was in a very subliminal ways. So we are taught, once again, in insurmountable layers that the answers are found by everything you see within the 3D world. When you begin listening to your essence and your soul, your higher self, your ancestors, and the stars within you, you realize they're all aspects of you that are waiting for you to ask them what they see in you and what they see of you. They want to show you the mirror and the reflection of what your true self is. But what I found, especially at the beginning of my journey, was that I was afraid to see. I was afraid of what to see. The world is projecting its own story on you. And you need to flip the script and see the story you want to see in the world. So I'm going to end this message with this last tidbit. Part part of my show will also be spent creating oracle cards once a week. So I'll show you the process of how I work creatively through channeling, through channeling of art, basically. And I will have it all recorded for you to observe. So you'll watch me do the oracle card of that day. And after we go in depth of this intricate math system, as well as other topics that I prepared for you, we will focus each week solely on making oracle cards that pertain to this overarching message. And if anything, I also encourage you to make your own oracle cards along with me. But 8 months after my dream, I had decided to take the leap at looking at tarot cards for the first time. I was deeply intrigued by them because of my love of art. And mind you, it took me 8 months to even pick up a tarot deck after my dream. But all I could think about was how much I wanted to make my own decks. And one day while I was looking at and studying 2 of the cards, the Hierophant and the High Priestess, I was very drawn to those 2 cards. A thought came to me. You should create your own style of those 2 cards. So I had the idea and I was about to start sketching when I paused. And I sat there for a bit and had a thought again. What if you just try to intuitively draw? So something a sibling of mine gave me was an art book called The Process, a new foundation in art and design. I'll give you a link below so you know what I'm talking about. But the purpose of the art book is to teach art students to develop formal excellence and to help them develop this strong sense of aesthetics that are coupled with the ability to generate new ideas for themselves. It's like this balance between form, which is image making, and then content, which is the conceptual thinking that must be reconciled. So this is an issue that a lot of artists have experience, even those who aren't artists, even though I feel like everybody is an artist, is that artists doubt their own ability to allow the process to just flow and to allow whatever image, thought, or smell, or pictures that comes to mind to simply let their hands draw whatever comes out. There's no judgment. You just watch and see what the void within you forms. So at this point, I was oblivious as to why I was wanting to do this. But in hindsight, this sounds a lot like I was wanting to channel or remote view, right? So I put pencil to paper and I allowed whatever shape to arise. And I watched as I simply morphed an image into this. And I was surprised to find that there was a thought connected to the image. I wrote down the phrase, the chords / chords that bind. And I know in this picture it only says 1 chords, but I had the stark image of chords, CHORDS, and then there being like a line underneath it, and then the other word chords is mirroring that chords. So there's chords from music and sound with chords, an actual chord. So the chords that bind. Now I'm going to place this image right here and let yourself sit on this. So take in the message and ask yourself, in the picture, and ask yourself what this means to you or what interpretation you take from this. The chords that bind. With my little understanding at the time of each of those tarot cards, I had received a message basically from the Hierophant and the High Priest through my subconscious and higher self. And after I drew it, I went on a long journey of trying to decrypt or decode the meaning of the message I channeled. I was just completely transfixed with what I had drawn, and I was being taught by those 2 cards without even realizing it. So the card, we have, you know, the sun, we have the mountain range, we have the water with the bubbles forming up. And you see those little squiggly lines kind of where the water is. And those are representation for me of sound, like sound waves or like a heartbeat. And it's kind of hard to tell, but that's what it is. It's just like the sound waves or frequency. And then to the left, you have the spiral, which represented to me at the time of the universe, but also it's representative and mainly of the self, right? Of the self, right? And then you have the actual chords that are crosshatched in between. So, I know that I have sent your brain on overload. And if you hyperventilated at all at this point within my episode, I do apologize. Just breathe. Allow yourself time to process and breathe. For this card, if you have any thoughts that have come to you or anything, please message me and let me know what thoughts came to mind. I on another episode, I will go into depth about this card, but this card will be explained in many layers and build-ups throughout my show. We are at the end finally, and this is the final short message that is to be given. From Mother Earth and those of your higher selves. Everything that has been shared today is for you, a gift. Even if it is a gift that might feel like it crumbles your walls and questions everything that you know. Please know that it is given with unconditional love. We are stepping into the realms of the new world. The new world where the gods will once again roam the earth and the magic of old and new will awaken from their slumbers. It is time for you to step into your own self-sovereignty for yourself, for your children, for your creations, and for Mother Earth. I am emphasizing this once again, not to toot my horn, but I am a seer, I am a scribe, I am a dreamer between worlds. I am the person who's going to rip off the band-aids in order for it to heal properly. I'm a spiritual doula to help nurture you into your self-sovereignty. And I am a herald and a messenger of the gods. And the surprise twist? You are the gods.